I hope the screen is visible to everyone. Yeah. So the topic for today is Web 3.0, exploring the unexplored. So just quickly, as I said, let's keep it more of a, discussion based thing. So does anyone here have an idea about what, Web 3.0 is, or does anybody have an idea, what or anybody who has remotely even worked on Web 3.0, or anybody, who who has some thoughts on Web 3.0? I would love to start it off with you guys and, understanding more on what do you guys think about Web 3.0 before I start. Okay, hi Mayank, I see your message. So what are your views on Web 3.0? Okay, so someone said distributed computing, that's interesting. Then blockchain. Okay. I believe a lot of you guys might be coming from a tech-based background only. So maybe all of you guys might have an initial level of understanding of Web 3.0. But okay, Vignesh says AI. It's not quite AI, and it's something which is very different from AI, although both of these things are considered deep tech only. But yeah, but AI and blockchain kind of confluences, perfectly together and can be built into a separate thing in itself. Okay, Pooja has a very interesting take. Okay, so I'll actually thank you so much, guys, for your responses. Everybody had a very interesting take on what Web 3.0 is. So initially, before I start, I'll go through the table of contents, and I'm not sure if the table of contents, the things which I would be kind of going through today. The first, I'll give you a brief introduction about who am I, what have I done, and I'll start off with a very brief introduction and brief, a very brief timeline of what the World Wide Web has been. What are the iterations of internet, which they were talking about, what he was just talking about. Then we'll quickly dive into, what this 3.0 revolution kind of looks like. And moving on ahead with what is the tech behind 3.0, which a lot of you guys have kind of, included into your answer when I asked what 3.0 is, which is the blockchain technology. On top of it, I'll quickly brief around these crypto coins and tokens, a brief tokenomics, which would be more of an understanding of how do things work in the backend side of things, what NFTs are, and again, extending the concept of Web 3.0, I'll also introduce what a metaverse is. So I'm a 24-year-old entrepreneur and philanthropist, and I am somebody who is very deeply interested in tech, and also somebody who is very much interested in philanthropic calls, and who is very much involved in humanitarian efforts as well. So more on the professional side, I am a co-founder at Metafi Labs, which was recently acquired by Jet Synthesis, and Jet Synthesis is one of the, if a few of you guys might know, is one of the biggest players in India when it comes to immersive experiences. So apart from that, I'm also a non-executive director at Memboro, which is a platform as a service-based company, which revolves around creator economy. I'm also a humanitarian award winner through GMHA and United Nations. I was also a mentor at EAT Denver 2022. And apart from that, I'm an investor, and likely so I'm a human. So quickly, it's just looping through what is the timeline, what has been the timeline of World Wide Web, or what do we understand when we talk about, Web 1, Web 2, or Web 3.0? What are these terminologies? So basically, Web 1.0, or internet as we call it, started gaining its mainstream, revolution in 90s and early 2000s, where the first version of web was more of a very unidirectional thing. So when I say unidirectional, that means the data was just, was something which flowed through through the websites to the user, but there was no contribution of the user. It was kind of a one way what to say, one way pass for any consumer or any user to kind of consume the data. There was no way for them to contribute to the data. So which of course included things like one way forums or blogs where there were some things, informational blogs which were put out there where the user can just consume the data, but he had no control over making any changes or putting out his own data out there. Then Web 2.0, as we call it, the current version which is out there, that brought about more of a social interactive kind of a concept, where the data and the interaction kind of became bi-directional, where not even like not just they were consuming data, they were also contributing the data. The companies are also collecting the data from the users, and which is where I guess it kind of let loose, and the data was consumed to have targeted ads, and the companies used it as a as a form of monetizations. And although it still has billions of users, this phase of internet is very information centric, as we say. So this is where the need for Web 3.0 came in, where the 3.0 is more user centric, as Web 2.0 was information centric, and Web 3.0 is more user centric, um, where the core concept or the ideology that it follows is the decentralization, or the fact that users have more privacy and more control over their data. That what do they want to do with their data is something which is totally up to them, rather than the data just being used to have targeted ads, and of course the no sense of privacy and no sense of security which was there. So there's a good example which kind of formulates more on it, wherein there's a thing called, a web service called Odyssey. So it's more like a it's like a YouTube with decentralized platform. So basically the more you consume data, the more you provide data, that your habits and data and what you're listening to, the more you earn. There's a certain token kind of link to it. So it's more of onto us for to decide that what do we do with that data. Do we provide this data or not? And kind of it gives them the flexibility of kind of keeping it very user centric. So again, I think before we move forward, I guess it's best for every concept that there is, if there are any certain set of questions which are there, so I've put it on a parallel screen. So as we move ahead, we can as I said, keep it a bit more interactive and a discussion based thing. So if somebody has any questions, please just keep you know just keep asking them in the webinar chat itself. Yeah, so moving on, let's expand more on the 3.0 revolution. So as everybody kind of passes it around that it's the next iteration of internet, and this is what the internet would look like in the next phase of web revolution. But what exactly is it, and why is it that it's seen as a next revolution of internet? So basically, as previously expanded, Web 3.0 is totally built upon the core concept of decentralization, openness, and greater user utility. And expanding more on it, these three core concepts are some things which which gives you a sense of security, which gives you a sense of privacy and confidentiality, which gives you a sense of having more of a semantic based web revolution, and kind of having a sense of control over your data, which is being used, or which you guys are providing onto the system. And there's this very interesting term which which kind of came along, which is decentralization. So what exactly is decentralization? So if again, I like to keep it very open ended. If somebody would want to expand on what decentralization is, or if somebody wants to kind of tell the viewers what decentralization is before I move ahead, I think that would be perfect. I'll just wait for I think 10 to 15 seconds if there is someone who would want to do that. Yeah. Just like before this, I think, the best way would be if you guys could raise your hand before, before putting this, so that, I would know if there is somebody who's looking to answer. So Vignesh says a more decentralized online experience allowing individuals to take back control of their data and information. Okay, interesting. Okay, very interesting. And I guess there's who's not controlled by one entity. Yeah, as Vignesh and Pooja very rightly said, it's the the concept of decentralization is basically, not having one single entity which controls all of your data and which controls all of your decisions. So when I say not having a central authority, what does it mean? Like, for example, if we look at, all of, suppose Facebook, we take Facebook's example, like in this particular concept. So everything which goes around Facebook itself, that is something which is controlled by Facebook as an entity only. So there's one, what you say, centralized node which controls everything, which kind of flows through the whole loop. But decentralization is something which involves a number of stakeholders, or as we call, a number of nodes which are responsible for, just making any transaction happen. So it's something which is decentralized along every computer or every node which is which is connected to the network, and every transaction is approved and every transaction is processed through all of these nodes, and every transaction is reflected and kind of seen on their own ledgers as well. So the concept of decentralization is something which brings about a lot of security, because when we talk about the hackability as well, if somebody needs to access, or if somebody needs to break into the network or break into the system, it's comparatively, easier for them to, target a central node, if there is any central node, in case of, a centralized system. But in case of a blockchain, that becomes practically impossible, because if somebody needs to hack into a network, they practically need to hack into all of the systems which are connected into the whole network, all of these nodes which are connected into the network, and which kind of makes it, almost next to impossible for them to have. And say to pay for data to be uploaded and pay to get any data. Uh, no, so I hope I pronounce your name right. So Bhavya Raj, so we need to pay for data to be uploaded and pay to get any data in Web 3.0. No, that's not the actually case, but the thing is, ideally you get rewarded for putting out data over there. Like in a lot of these cases right now, again, it's a very upcoming concept only. So there's a concept called I mean, if any of you guys might have used any 3.0 browsers, like, there's a browser called Brave browser and all of those things. So in this case, basically you are being paid to, provide information that those companies can monetize. So that is usually done in terms of, these crypto tokens, and because these crypto tokens are basically used as currencies for these decentralized, kind of payments, and in order to, have a payment structure in place when it comes to, Web 3.0 or these blockchain kind of technologies. So it's not like you need to pay, but there's a concept where the user is rewarded for, giving out information, because eventually it's your information and you decide what you do with it. So if you decide to share it, then there are certain ways, or there are, again, certain companies or tools which compensate you for it. And I guess Farzana Akhtar says, who regulates the system? But see, right now the whole system is something, as we say, because what you're saying, it's decentralized, it's totally spread upon everybody who who has a stake in it. So again, there are multiple, I'm not sure if you, when you say regulate, Like, are you referring to a government body, or when you regulate, are you talking more in terms of how this whole pool is regulated? But in this particular case, I mean, it's it's yeah, as Francisco has kind of said, it's kind of self-regulated only. But again, the voting, or how it goes ahead, and there's a whole concept of a thing called DAO. So I think somebody had mentioned it above, but so this DAO is basically, it's a ruling entity, which is which is decentralized, and which is set up, and on the basis of, I mean, every stakeholder has a has a voting right, where what the future, how is it regulated in the future, and how the whole project, or whole the concept, or in any case, let's take an example for a token, or let's take an example for any crypto based, or any 3.0 based token which is there. So these things can be very much regulated through the stakeholders which are which are involved, and the future of this this regulation, or it's kind of self-regulated, as Francisco had had rightly said. But when we say self-regulated, that means every stakeholder has a right to put his opinion on to where the future is headed, and how should it be regulated. But in terms of, I'm not sure in what context were you talking about. So if we are talking about regulation in terms of these government, and these policy regulations, that's a very separate topic. I mean, that which is not very much linked to Web 3.0. Okay, so yeah, so moving on it. So as I said, Web 3.0 is more of a back-end technology. Like in the front end, these things are very, are something which is being managed on the back-end side of things, and like through the concept of smart contracts, and how do we kind of put these things out together. It's something, even though like on the front page we can have the similar things which are being there, but on the back end, it's something which is totally revolutionary in terms of how it operates. And as I've already explained more on it, there's no central controlling node which is there. So every, so there is no single point of failure. So ideally, if for any blockchain network to fail, it it the whole majority of the network needs to go down for any blockchain network to totally fail. So yeah, so as I think we got ahead of ourselves, that what is the technology which is behind Web 3.0. So Web 3.0 basically works on the concept of decentralization and the technology of blockchain. So when we say blockchain, what do you mean by blockchain? So blockchain, if we kind of break both of these, if you break the whole thing kind of in two parts, block and chain. So basically, a block is a place where the data is actually stored, and the chain is the place where this data, or this node, is kind of added to the whole to the whole network of blockchains. So basically, if we expand more on it, blockchain is a system of kind of recording information in a way that it's practically impossible to change. Once once data is registered, or once a block is uh, okay, once a block is kind of added to the whole network, or added to the whole system, it becomes impossible to change it. So every transaction which is there, or every data which is stored there, it's totally visible to everyone, and that is something which cannot be manipulated, or that is not something which can be infiltrated into and messed up with. So data which stores onto the blockchain is something which can never be tampered with. So giving a more sense of explanation of how does blockchain actually work. So if this image is visible to all of you guys, so there are some certain set of steps which are a part of of a transaction, which goes through the concept of blockchain. So basically, once a transaction is requested and authenticated, So there's a block which is created, which represents that, this transaction has been created. So then this block is sent out to all of the nodes which are connected, because I said it's decentralized and everything passes through, all of the nodes which are connected to the network. Then this block is sent out to every node which is a part of the network, and post that this all of these nodes kind of, there are some complex algorithms to do that. So this transaction is validated by these nodes, and once these transactions are validated by these nodes, then this block subsequently is added to the existing blockchain. It kind of, continues a chain like effect which is there. And for this validation, usually all of the stakeholders, or all of the, the people who are involved to validate the transactions, they are also, they are also rewarded a certain, a certain reward, which is mostly in terms of their cryptocurrency only, for which the transaction they are, kind of validating. And once this thing is added, the whole, this update is kind of, is it distributed among the whole network of the network of the the blockchain which is kind of connected. And then of course this is how the whole transaction kind of works place. So again, for this particular topic, if there are any any doubts or anything, and as I said before, just raise a hand if anybody is typing, so that, I'll wait, otherwise I'll just move ahead. Yeah, as I mean, Francisco has clearly kind of very nicely explained. So in this particular case, the transaction which we are talking about is an end-to-end. Let's just say if somebody is sending Bitcoin from address A to Bitcoin from address B. So this particular case, in this we have just talked about a proof of work concept, which usually which is the concept behind Bitcoin. But so this is just a representation of how blockchain works, by taking an example of, suppose, a simple Bitcoin transaction which is happening from node A to node B. So sorry. So moving on, I'll just quickly cover a couple of points and then take these questions for these cryptos and tokens and everything, and blockchain as a whole, before we move on to this expanded concept of metaverses. Okay. So basically, as we just talked about, there's a, what are exactly are crypto coins and tokens. So basically, crypto coin is something which is used as a currency factor in, by having these smart contracts, or by having, these the concept of blockchain on the back end. Like in the previous slide, when we talked about, how a transaction is getting into the blockchain, or how the transaction is actually, passing away in the blockchain. So this was an example of how, suppose a Bitcoin is being transferred from node A to node B. But now this Bitcoin is something, which is used as a currency, having a blockchain as its backend, and these coins who were built on top of these native blockchains are called crypto coins. So there's a brief difference between crypto coins and tokens. So when we talk about blockchain, there are multiple blockchains which are available. Like like a lot of blockchains are there, a lot of blockchain technologies are there, and everybody, although they stem from the same concept, but a lot of them have a very different way of kind of operating, and the different way of utilities which they have. So like there is technology behind, for example, we can take an example of Ethereum. So Ethereum is in itself a blockchain. So again, there are multiple ways to kind of operate on it. Like it was working on proof of work, and now it's migrating to a concept called proof of stake, which I seem is a bit advanced for now. Maybe we can take it in the Q&As and once we move ahead from this particular topic. So the main difference between crypto coins and crypto tokens is crypto coins are something which are totally built upon a native blockchain. So when I say native blockchain, what I mean is, so for example, Ethereum is a blockchain, and they have the native coin which is called Ether. So Ether is the crypto coin which is operating on the native blockchain, which is Ethereum. However, there are many tokens who are built on top of this technologies. Like when we talk about, there's a the BAT token or the Blueprint token, and like, have any of you guys actually have been involved with cryptocurrencies in any way, or have any experience of working with cryptocurrencies per se? Just raise your hand once. I guess that that would do for it, rather than uh, waiting for it. Okay, so no. So yeah, no ways. Anyway, it is it has crashed a lot. So so this token is something which is more of an extended concept of a crypto coin, because crypto coin is native, although these tokens are built on top of these on top of these blockchains, and they are not kind of crafted into the blockchain itself. So any doubt regarding this thing? Oh, that's nice. I hope it's doing well for you. Okay, so I'll move ahead. So there's another very interesting thing called non-fungible tokens, or NFTs. So as I just talked about, tokens, what tokens are, and these are something which are built on top of, any either currency or on top of a certain blockchain. So basically, non-fungible tokens are also, a digital token, which, where every token is associated to something, and every token has, very unique characteristics. So when I talk about, every token is different, and every token kind of holds unique characteristics, what I basically mean is, um, every NFT token which would be there, that would be very unique in the terms that no NFTs could be similar, and every NFT would have a a sense of ownership which would be there. So basically every NFT or any NFT which you own, so that would come up with a blockchain based ownership, or it can also be, actually NFTs can also be seen as ownership tokens, where anything that you do, where it could be, let's just say, drawing, so it can be the music, it can be images or digital images which are being put there, or any art, or any ecosystem, or even a phygital thing which is available into the system. So all of these things actually they could be linked to these tokens, or they can be tokenized in a certain way that all of these things have a certain sense of ownership, and that's something which can what do you say, never be replicated, or the ownership is something which is stored onto the blockchain, and every transaction related to that ownership is something which is stored onto the blockchain. So one very interesting concept, if we kind of move ahead with what NFTs are and how they can be useful for things moving ahead are. So right now, like as we see, mostly the NFTs which are available are more of these digital images, and maybe some avatars which are being tokenized, and which are being very uniquely provided to someone. But NFT as a technology is something which holds a lot of value, and moving forward, potentially this is something which we see from like moving ahead. This is where the whole mainstream adoption would kind of come in, like not just on the basis of the hype of NFTs, but more on the basis of utilities. Like let's just take an example. Suppose there are some certain transactions, or there are some, let's just say, if we can in a hyper realistic world, suppose your real estate papers. right? When you purchase a property, or when you know have like buy any kind of a property. So these real estate papers, if they are kind of put up as NFTs, or when I say they are stored as NFTs, or they are stored in blockchain, that basically or essentially means that every transaction which is taking place for that particular thing, or every detail which is there, or you being the owner, is something which is stored onto the blockchain. So it is something which can never be tampered with. And additionally, like on top of it, this is something which holds a record, and which would be kind of something which authenticates, or there's a certain sense of authenticity which is there when we talk about that we own this particular thing. So I mean, this authenticity is maintained through these okay, Francisco, I'll actually come to this question post this thing. So this authenticity is basically, something which is which NFTs very proudly claim to, or not actually claim, but because these things are being stored as, digital tokens which are there into the blockchain. This is something which is forever, and this is something which can never be tampered with. So there's an interesting question actually. Which Francisco had put forward, that how NFTs are generated. I can create a picture, but do I make it into an NFT? How? So basically, the way in which these NFTs are created is, and actually I have been very fortunate to be a part of a lot of big projects when it comes to NFTs. Like I've been involved with projects which were kind of which were a part of, suppose Ozzy Osbourne and all of these big names of Colin Tilly, the guy behind Justin Bieber's videos and all of that stuff. So basically, these you have a picture, right? So this picture is something, although this picture is something which is stored onto your cloud server. This picture in itself is not something which would be put onto the blockchain, but the location to this picture, or the metadata to this picture, is something which is stored onto the blockchain. So when we say that this picture is something which you own, so the authenticity, or the thing or the data which is stored onto the blockchain is the data regarding that picture, but not the PNG in itself. So so I'm not sure if that kind of answers your question, Francisco, that how is it generated, or if you kind of try to understand that how this picture is actually stored into the blockchain, and how kind of yeah. Okay, no issues. We'll actually come back to it in our end Q&A. We can get on to it. So now this comes, now, I mean, it's coming to the expanded version of Web 3.2. And the reason I say expanded is because, as I said, Web 3.2 and all these blockchain technologies are something which are on the back end, that, which is something which is operating on the tech side of things, on the back end side of things. But the Web 3.0, as we see that, okay, so I'll come back to this like in the end Q&As. So yeah, so when we talk about yeah, when we were just talking about how these technologies and like Web 3.0 or a blockchain itself is something which can be seen on the back end side of things, that how things on the back end are being operated, how data is being operated. But then there comes that like ever since this internet revolution was born, from the sense of the immersiveness, or from the sense of the interactiveness, how this web has kind of evolved through this over a period of actually past 2 decades, right? There, I mean, there has not been a significant change into that. And this is where it is believed that metaverse is something which should bring about a major change in how people also interact with it. Like, it's not just a dynamic page, or it's not just a simple sharing of data through a screen, but it can also be something where the experience, or anything that you're interacting with is something which revolves around you being on the center of it. So instead of experiencing the experience, you are living the experience. So this is where the concept of metaverse kind of comes in. So I mean, we all have heard about metaverses and what metaverses, but I mean, and how metaverses kind of moving ahead. And so, but what exactly is metaverse? So metaverse in itself can be seen as a, a network of 3D virtual worlds. So instead of, let's just say, instead of you right now walking into, Nike's website, let's just say in a very hyper realistic scenario. So you just go into Nike.com, you get into a website, you see, some pictures, you scroll through it, and you see if something kind of caters to your interest, and you kind of proceed on to buy it. But consider a scenario where, instead of entering into a website, you enter into a, a digital store or a virtual store which is there. And instead of you just, looking at the pictures, you have an option to try these things out, like by the comfort of your home. So ideally, it's something where, you enter into this virtual world where you are able to see everything that you like, where you are able to see, all of these options which are there, which are catered to your, your personal interest. And once you like a particular option, instead of just going on by the images, you can actually try it on through, these various augmented reality and all of these concepts. And extending more on it, yeah, it's more of a, suppose it's something where, you are replicating your own identity into this virtual or a digital space, where again this thing can be more enhanced to, the current augmented reality which is there, or virtual reality which is there, or extended reality which is there. So right now, although we can say that we are already in the first version of metaverse, because I mean, any social interaction, or any, social what do you say, display which is there, like, if you look at all of mostly in social media itself as well, most of the people are trying to personify a lot of things. Most of the people are trying to live a life which, they would want to live, but that is not the real life. But this thing kind of involved with the sense of belongingness, and that, that concept of having your, own digital identity, that is something, which, I mean, this metaverse would bring in. It's not just about these 3D objects, it's also about that personalization, it's also about that experience, it's also about kind of, being in the moment. So Prasanta asks, what is a digital twin? So think of it as, you having an identity in real life, right? So consider that, right now you were somebody who's, let's just say, who has a ponytail, or you were somebody, suppose, suppose you are a computer science engineer. But in a parallel world, let's just say, you have an identity which you have always wanted to live, or it could be something that, in real life you are somebody, like, Prasanta is somebody which people know on the set of certain traits that you have. It can be maybe, you I mean, you are very kind, people know you because you are very funny, you are very kind. Now the thing is, this personality trait, or this this persona which you have in real life, that thing kind of replicated out into this virtual world, or into the metaverse, where, whoever you are, either, or whoever you want to be, is something which you are into the metaverse. So this is basically a digital twin, where, the set of personalities, the set of traits, or who you want to be, or who you exactly are, this thing is replicated into a virtual world where, sorry, where you were able to, kind of pass it on, and you were able to basically, do whatever you want with your digital twin. Like, there are some certain restrictions with your physical, capabilities, that what you can do. Like right now, if you try to just move along, suppose if you want to go to, Dubai right now, right? Like just right now you want to experience Dubai, that is practically impossible, like within the next 5 minutes, for you to just experience Dubai in the next, in the next 5 minutes. Like, there are some physical limitations to that. But if you have a digital twin, then there would be digital twins of, let's just say, like Dubai, or Palm Jumeirah and all of those things. So through this digital twin, you can actually, travel around wherever you want. You can, experience the experiences which we have not until now. Or even if it's about you're looking to have a physical experience, you can have a sense of that experience, in your through your digital twin, and then you can decide that if you're willing to go ahead. So also heading the end of 1 hour, so I'll also speed up a bit before taking all of these question answers. So how does the timeline of metaverse look like? So metaverse in itself is, it starts with metaverse as a product or a service where, all of these attributes which we were kind of talking about, right? These are, or these are replicated from the Web 2.0 itself, but this thing added on with a 3D layer, or the immersiveness or that interactiveness on top of it. Secondly, it moves towards the part where, metaverse as a place, where metaverse is a place in itself, where, you can connect with people, you can interact with people, you can transfer yourselves to, and the belongings to, any part of these virtual worlds, or, through portals, you can move along from the place A to place B, and, you can actually interact with people, you can socialize with people. So, metaverse as a place is something which brings about that social factor into the metaverses. And the last thing is the metaverse as a moment where, like as we just talked about, having a digital twin and having our digital lives where, a lot of our physical counterparts and a lot of our physical abilities are kind of replicated as a moment into the metaverse. So and it's something, which we can see more of a sociological shift rather than just a technological, because in this case people would, actually immerse themselves into it. They, do things which, they have not done yet. They, they try to replicate, or kind of personify themselves, and they try to, pick out parts which they were unable to in their, let's just say, in their real life. So this becomes, more meaningful rather than, just being an experience. It becomes more of a very, personalized journey for them. And no, which, which we believe is something which is very important for any mainstream adoption, because the reason Web 2.0 also got so popular and got its mainstream adoption is because it gave people, a way to contribute, not just contribute, but it gave a people, a free hand to, just be, be just a, personify themselves, in the sense that, be social with each other, be like connect with each other, just, just have the ability to actually, just contribute in any way that you want. So kind of it gave you that, that double connection, or it gave you that, that bi-directional view where, we are not just consuming, you are also contributing, which is why, people got so engaged into it. Now this thing, paired up with actually, giving it a life, and kind of, this experience is not just something which is just, based around you going through these 3D worlds, but it's also, giving them a sense of belongingness, or kind of personalizing things according to them, or it's also more like, you being able to exactly replicate what you have always wanted to do with a certain set of actions which replicate the real world, and in any manner that you want, and in any way that you want. But again, and this is actually precisely something through, which we are trying to achieve um, through Metafi Labs, which I recently, I'm a co-founder of. So kind of building this whole ecosystem and bringing these things to the mainstream concept is something, where it's a metaverse as service, metaverse as a place, and metaverse as a moment. So we are, these three core concepts and principles are we are also driving towards, and we are also including. Now, finally, although metaverse is something which, looks very interesting, and the experience is something which, everybody is kind of very excited to just, just hear about, and maybe, if anybody, if you guys have actually experienced metaverse, so it looks very, very shiny on the inside when you were on the experiencing side of things. But what is the problem which which everybody is facing, that from the outside of it, when it's about why are not more people providing these experiences? Because I mean, once the, the mainstream adoption is something which is very much linked to the democratization, where everybody has the accessibility. So I mean, why is it like it's not something which is easily accessible to everyone? So one of the major reason behind this is metaverse in its current stage is something which is very quite which is very complex to build and manage. So when we talk about having a metaverse from a technological point of view, it's still something which is in its which can be seen as a deep tech, and it's highly I mean, from a cost point of view as well, and from a resources point of view as well, it is very complex to build and scale branded metaverses which can be out there. So this is something which has a which can be seen as a luxury rather than something which is accessible to everyone. And I mean, that is again something kind of bringing our ideologies in. So the democratization and making metaverse kind of accessible to everyone has been our core concept in building metaverses, like what we have been trying to do at MetaFi itself. So it is based around kind of having them mainstream by giving them everybody the accessibility. So even right now, if we if we look at like everybody who needs to have their own metaverse, they need to participate in a third party platform in one form or the another, where it cannot be seen as a an open metaverse or something which anybody can customize and kind of enjoy according to their own needs. And if we look towards it, there are just a handful of third-party platforms which are available. But then again, they also, usually all of these relationships are kind of intermediated by third-party tech platforms. So, I mean, you do not have a, free world, to say the least. And there is no ownership when it comes to, customer data and content. And when we talk about these personalizations, there's no ownership. These third party platforms are still controlling and owning, and I mean, there is no way to actually attach any utility to it. So in all of these metaverses, it has no utility or no purpose, to say the least. It's just a 3D world where you just go and you try to figure out what do we need to do. And lastly, because there's just handful of third party platforms, there is I mean, there's no point of flexibility in terms of how these these other, if somebody wants to have the metaverse, how do they operate? So that is something which is totally managed through, and all these, even when we talk about these margins and pricing, all of this thing is something which is controlled by these third parties, and which in itself seems very a big hiccup of its own. Because if we talk about how internet came into the place, so if there were just 5 or 10 players who were responsible for building the whole metaverse, and how people, building the whole internet, and how these people kind of move along and all of that stuff, that would that would not actually give that mass adoption, and that would not kind of democratize it to every every region, every geographical region which is there. And yeah, so this is of course just the start of it, and the moving ahead, like in the next decade to come, there's, I mean, of course there's a lot of things which can be changed, and I'm sure this democratization is something which should become very mainstream. So moving on, just as a final note, what are the opportunities which are available uh, in Web 3.0 in itself, when we talking about this extended Web 3.0 as well? So firstly, I mean, these are very threefold. So one thing could be more on the entrepreneurship side of things. One could be more on the development side of things, where you're coming from tech background and you want to get into development. That last thing is more on the investing side of things. So from the entrepreneurship side of things, you can always, there's always a way to, it has actually given you more than a platform to, if you are artistic in any way, then, giving you a platform to sell your art and actually, decentralize it. You can launch your own NFT projects, or a decentralized project which is run by the community itself. You can have your own, like a metaverse product ecosystem. You can have a mass kind of a product ecosystem. You can launch your, because this is a starting stage again, as we, most of us like to compare it to the 1990s of, internet, or as we like to, compare it to the early 2000s of internet. This is something which is just starting up. So the early movers advantage is definitely something which is there. And in terms of development, and in terms of where the scope lies is, of course, there's huge demand, and there's, huge opportunities for a blockchain developer to become a blockchain developer, where you can, uh, sorry, uh, there's a huge opportunity for being a blockchain developer, and there's a huge demand for people who code smart contracts and who build these blockchains and who work on top of it. You can be a Solidity developer, which is a programming language which is used for, Ethereum based blockchain programming. And you can become a game or a VR engine developer. And if you are one of those, we are hiring right now. So, I mean, you can drop a mail to my email ID, or you can just put your mail ID uh, onto the webinar chat, and I'll love to connect you guys. Uh, and lastly, you can become more of a backend engineer, like when it comes to, how, like, you can become a blockchain backend engineer, or kind of somebody who bridges both of these things, that, the web 3.0s and the web 2.0s, and somebody who bridges both of these things in terms of how data is flowing from A to B. And lastly, of course, investing is always an option, where, you can invest into early, utility-based projects, or you can invest, because space is something which is very early right now, and which is definitely something in its, in its seed stage, to say the least, and it's rooting out right now. So right now, investing into these, the people who are building something which is for the future, is something definitely, which we can do. And lastly, these tokens and kind of staking and lending have their own set of tokenomics which works place. So finally, thank you so much for having me. I think, and thank you for bearing with me for almost around an hour. It was, I mean, definitely it was great sharing some insights with you guys. And I'll see you in the metaverse. And yeah, so right now we can, if there are some Q&As and stuff, we can
Okay,
just.
thank you, Varun. But before we move toward answering the questions, I would like the request the attendees to please fill in the poll about feedback, as it helps us to conduct more such sessions. So we can carry on with the question and answer session.
Okay, so until then, I'll actually look at the webinar chat. So yeah, Bhaviraj, you can definitely own a store in Metaverse, but as I was talking about right now, having a store in the Metaverse is something which is a luxury, in the sense that right now most of these Metaverses are not too utility based. It's more of a, a 3D based environment which is there. And as I was talking about decentralized and all of these things, they do not have any, commerce integration which is there. But moving on, as it's moving ahead, and like for us as well, we are very much focused on, you know uh, building, a product which can be also seen as a, a Shopify for metaverses, where, through drag and drop you are able to build your e-commerce stores, kind of interlink them with your all of your digital channels, and, kind of sell any kind of thing which you are selling. Thank you so much for your kind words, Sunil and Prasanta. So I'll actually try to quickly, answer like the questions I can. And I am a bit conscious of time, actually, so I'll try to answer as many questions as I could. But anyway, if there's anything, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'll be more than happy to answer your queries. So Mayank asked that, are there any, apart from tokens, are there any other ways which we can invest? So, of course. So, but then that amounts more into, getting into the, let's just say, an angel investing part of things, where, there are a lot of projects, or there are a lot of companies who are entering into, transitioning the whole, Web 3.0 space, and how it kind of links up with the current version of Web 3.0. Because right now, although it's something which can be seen as, there's Web 2.0, there's Web 3.0, and there's a huge bridge between there. So, there are a lot of solutions which are being built every day on top of it. There are a lot of, companies which are being built on top of it. So again, in a lot of these cases, these projects also, you can invest as investing into their tokens if you don't want to be a direct investor. But apart from that, that is how you can do that. How do you become? Yeah, Francisco, there are multiple courses which are there when it comes to, blockchain and backend engineer, and that kind of depends on, what expertise are you trying to look forward to, or what are you trying to, build through that. So, but if you go towards, Udemy, I guess you would find a ton of courses which are there when it comes to blockchain, A to Z blockchain developer and all of that stuff. That's definitely you can get. If I'm nodding, what can I do in the Metaverse? So, okay, so that's the case right now. Metaverse is, again, you don't need to be a gamer to experience the metaverse, and again, that is what we are also driving forward. That, you don't need to have all of these, let's just say you don't need to be a gamer. Suppose, you just, yeah, I'm again giving you a very hyper realistic example, that suppose you open, nike.com, or nike.com/ Nikeverse, or anything of that sort, right? Then you directly enter into that metaverse experience, where, you are looking at a store where you're experiencing things. So you don't need to be a gamer, or you don't need to game it. It's more about you getting into that experience through, open channels if needed. You could be a shopper and you can experience the metaverse. And, you can be just a, let's just say, you can, like, you can be a fan of an artist, and you can experience the metaverse. Like, Justin Bieber held a concert in metaverse. So most of the people who were involved into that concert were not gamers only, but they were more of the, fans who were there for the experience. So again, it's necessary. I mean, you don't need to necessarily be a gamer, but I mean, you just, this need to be someone who is willing to explore. That's it. Prasanta, I mean, it's practically impossible to name how many DAOs are there in existence, because if you look towards a wave where, a lot of NFT projects were operating, and a lot of NFT projects came up with a lot of DAOs. So it's ideally, I mean, it's practically impossible to, name. There would be thousands of DAOs which are there. And like a few of the there was this, as I was talking about, there was this a project by Colin Tilley which I was a part of. So in that case, they also brought about the DAO system, where, how things move ahead, or how some certain decisions are taken. That is something which was decided through the DAO itself, wherein, all of the members who held a token in it were able to, vote for it, that where does it go from now. Yeah, Prasanta, and another interesting question, how 5G is going to have an impact in realizing metaverse in real practice. So that's very interesting to say the least, because right now one of the biggest challenge which is also there is, like, apart from the, the top, few percent of the world, not everybody has an access to high speed internet. So this adoption of 5G is something, because if we are looking at a web-based metaverse where, anybody can just log in through their web browsers, it demands, loading up of a lot of heavy assets which are there. So again, I mean, having 5G or high speed internet is something which would reduce this, this, what do you say, the huge hiccup, or huge, step there is, that you need to jump out for, in order for you to experience it. If 5G becomes mainstream, then, I mean, if you have that high speed internet, then, it would get much more easier for anybody to, take, I mean, because if you look at, these heavy websites as well, right. Right now, if somebody is using a very, low latency network, then for them to even access that website is something, which becomes more of a task. So as we move it, and as metaverse also matures, this is something which should go towards it. And again, again to mention MetaFi into it, so we are building a cloud solution where even if, which is totally also very much in sync with lower speed internets as well, where we are building a cloud solution on our backend part of things for a product that even for, let's just say, a low latency network, all of these things could be loaded in a proper manner without being too much dependent on the internet for the end user, because we understand that high speed is something which is not accessible. And when we talk about the democratization, of course, that the first step means accessibility to everyone who's there. How is NFT and power consumption? And these, whereas both of these things are not quite related per se, but power, I mean, if you talk about power consumption in the terms of that, how for mining, bitcoins and all of that stuff, a lot of power is consumed. And I mean, they can be seen as indirectly linked in the sense that every transaction needs to be validated. And it is usually, if it's on top of the concept of proof of work, it needs to be validated, and it demands a lot of power consumption. But a direct I mean, this is the relation which we can kind of find out. Yeah, it is not eco-friendly, but right now the Ethereum is being switched to a concept called proof of stake. So when the proof of stake kind of comes in, that's where the uh, it would become considerably very eco-friendly. Francisco, how do I get into the metaverse? Do I need to some high-tech goggles? Do I need to get started needing the metaverse that I might be able to contribute? And so right now, again, the metaverse is something see, again, in metaverse is a very huge concept in itself. So there are parts of augmented reality, there's a part of just 3D replication of assets, and then there's a part of virtual reality. So when we talk about metaverse, usually what we see is that those big glasses and those obnoxious glasses which you need to put and experience that reality, but that is more on the virtual reality part of things. But metaverse in itself is something which is also a 3D immersed experience which is there. So to experience the metaverse, essentially you don't practically need VR as of now. Like VR can be seen as a stage of metaverse. So I mean, just being into that immersiveness, or some things where you can experiencing like things related to augmented reality and all of that stuff. So that is also a part of metaverse only. But if you want to have that virtual reality, then of course you need to have those VR goggles out there. So I mean, I think it's already way beyond the time limit. If there's, I mean, I might have left a few questions, I might have missed out a few questions, and if I mean, I love to answer them to you. I've left my I mean, you can connect on LinkedIn, and I would love to answer your questions onto that. Thank you so much, guys, for bearing with me. Thank you so much for having me here.